Greetings, dear viewers. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. This isn't a Twisted Take, or even a reaction video, but actually a story of how forcing myself to play through Dark Souls 2, the original Dark Souls 2, on the Xbox 360, gave me an even greater appreciation for the original Dark Souls game. To begin, let me illuminate my journey through the From Software catalog. Many years ago, in the distant age of 2012, or so, I played this stupid, annoying game that was just hard. The combat was crap, the enemies were crap, I hated the game. It was basically a huge waste of my time. This game was Dark Souls. I was a scrub, a noob. I failed to get good. And so I went hollow and walked away from Dark Souls, and I did something that was unthinkable. I forgot that I ever even played it. Fast forward 7 years to 2019, and I have played through an entire generation console cycle, and the next generation, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, only a year away from release. A friend of mine let me have free rein to his rather modest selection of PlayStation 4 games. I went through most of them, giving them a try. One of those games was not Dark Souls. It was Bloodborne. By this point, I had started to become bored with gaming. After having played nearly 30 years, I felt that I had seen it all, I played it all. I am a 34-year-old autistic. It is very easy for me to recollect the finest details of a lot of games that I've played in my life. I have played hundreds of games, maybe even thousands, but spent most of my life, when there was a difficulty slider, playing it on easy and basically being a god in whatever game I played. Unbeknownst to me, this would end up having a drastic effect on me. Playing Bloodborne awoke something in me. The game was a different breed, and I had never experienced anything like it in my life. I hated it. I knew it was bullshit. I knew that every time that I died, that it was the game doing something that was garbage, and that the game sucked. It wasn't my fault. But something compelled me to keep trying. In the opening of Bloodborne, I was thrown into Central Yharnam. This area has basic enemies and a few large trolls. Not even close. There you go. What takes me less than 20 minutes to get through now took me hours of struggle to get through back then. I kept throwing myself at it only to encounter a boss battle that I was in no shape to take on. It was a huge, beastly creature that jumped out in front of me. The cleric beast. I was struggling with basic enemies. This thing kicked my teeth in.
Surprise, motherfucker.
And as I'm writing this nearly 4 years after the fact, I cannot tell you when exactly it clicked. But at some point I started getting further. I was making my vials last. And I took down the cleric beast and even Father Gascoigne with some effort. Now, I didn't beat Bloodborne at the time. Life and a great many other things got in the way. Including Rom the vacuous sucking in her tiny spidey armor and she can shove it up her potato sack looking. Nowadays, I can, generally speaking, take out the cleric beast on my first try. Gascoigne, usually the first time, maybe the second or third. Basically, the point is that Bloodborne kickstarted my interest in the From Software games. An interest that would blossom into something closer to an obsession of sorts. As I have written several college essays about Dark Souls and the director Hidetaka Miyazaki. The original idea of starting a channel happened a few years ago when I was playing Dark Souls. I wanted to share my opinions about it. I am on a few Dark Souls groups on Facebook, but naturally people either did not care about your longly worded opinion, or they think you're an idiot and vehemently tell you that you're an idiot and you know nothing about anything. And it's even amazing that you're still breathing. You are not playing it the right way, you are a failure, and you will always be a failure. The first time I played through Dark Souls, I did myself a disservice by watching a playthrough. Good old fighting cowboy rode shotgun with me the entire time, not knowing he was ever near me. Now, I tried to go through each area by myself, without seeing what he did. But I would watch whenever I got stuck, which turned out to be often. It wasn't until nearly 30% of the way through the game that I was walking through the Undead Burg and that it suddenly hit me that I had played this game before, and this wasn't the first time I'd been here. Not referring to the first time in the playthrough. Now, why didn't this hit me at the time when I first walked through the Undead Burg?
I have no memory of this place.
Don't know. For a while, I actually started to doubt that I had played the game and was simply suffering from deja vu. Then while helping go through my mom's house after my stepfather passed, I found some of my old things and 2 games among my collection, Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2 for the Xbox 360. Turns out I had tried them, hated them both so much, but kept them to add to my collection. Then I simply forgot that I'd ever had them. It was staggering to me that Bloodborne had such a significant impact on my opinion of games and how to play them. Obviously, it translated to Dark Souls in a strange way, as Bloodborne is much faster, much more chaotic, and actively encourages aggressiveness, whereas Dark Souls is a much slower, more tactical game. Only, while you would think that Bloodborne's more attack and dodge-heavy style of combat would have trained me to be a perfect player, alas, I was, for a long time, at a point where I plateaued and was unable to learn as a player how to time my dodges, swings, and healing. I honestly believe that my first playthrough of Dark Souls was done through sheer luck. I was guided by Cowboy, sure, but obviously the boss battles and the enemies I had to take on myself. Now, as I was a noob my first time, I went through without summoning because I wasn't really aware that it was a thing or how to properly use it. I tried my best to make it my own playthrough. As such, I naturally missed a lot of things, and I understood even less. Like most, I was used to being actively handed the story. Games like Mass Effect, Knights of the Old Republic, God of War, Fallout, New Vegas, Bioshock, and many, many more had just spoon-fed their story to me, so I had been spoiled on a certain type of narrative structure. They also offered varying difficulty levels, and as stated before, I always played on easy. With Knights of the Old Republic, it made sense as everything was number and stat based, but the other games I liked feeling like I was invincible. This resulted in a very different problem I started to face. I was getting bored with video games. Yet, these games showed me that it was possible for it to be fun and challenging at the same time and opened my eyes to a whole new world. Is Dark Souls challenging? Yes. Is it impossible? No. As a fan of From Software games, and as I don't use the term fan lightly, that should tell you what you need to know about my opinions of these games. The company of From Software and the godly directorial skills of one Hidetaka Miyazaki. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. That being said, the first From Software game that I ever actually managed to finish was Dark Souls. It was a moment unlike any other. While it was probably 9 years after the first person had beaten it, through sheer luck and determination I managed to defeat Gwen and chose to rekindle the flame. To a hardcore fan, this ain't a big deal. Sure, you beat it, but did you do it while naked with no weapons using a Guitar Hero controller while blindfolded and having your nuts smacked with a hammer? No? Then you didn't actually win. Get good, scrub. Obviously, I am going to address the get good mentality. But for now, let's just say that I didn't actually get good at the game. I got lucky and managed to fumble my way through the end. But as I managed to defeat Gwen, yes, I know that he's parryable, and for that, most people think he's easy. But I was garbage at parrying, all but the simplest people, so it wasn't really an option for me. I remember that when I finally beat him, I grabbed my phone and recorded a video message to my brother telling him that I'd finally beaten Dark Souls. He told me later that when he first saw the video, he thought something terrible had happened because I looked like I was about to cry. My adrenaline was so high and my sense of victory and accomplishment so intense that after fighting Gwen what had to have been a dozen times, I managed to claim victory and never looked back. While there were ups and downs in my journeys, mostly down, my victory over Gwen gave me a sense of exhilaration and accomplishment unlike anything I had ever experienced in the game before. I promptly jumped into Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin, feeling very much like I could take on the world, only to have my teeth kicked in utterly before I could even get to the last giant. This instantly set me in opposition to this game. By this point, I was able to get through the opening level of Dark Souls, Bloodborne, Dark Souls Remake, Dark Souls 3, Sekiro, and even later, Elden Ring. So it made zero sense to me that this one game was my undoing. It was like having to learn everything all over again. But I digress. We were talking about my first defeat of Gwen and my decision, because I didn't know that I had a choice, to rekindle the flame and watch my character engulfed by fire. Fast forward to present day, I have beaten Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, the Dark Souls remake, and Elden Ring twice. This leads me to the point of this video essay, which for the sake of brevity I will be splitting into several videos. My current word script count is nearly 16,000 words. For reference, those who might know my channel, my God of War video was an hour long, and it was only 6,500 words. While I have beaten all the games, the order has definitely been wonky. First I beat Dark Souls, then Dark Souls 3, then Bloodborne, then Demon Souls, then Elden Ring, and finally, as of writing this, I have finished the vanilla version of Dark Souls 2 and Scholar. I honestly prefer the original version of Dark Souls 2, because Scholar the First Sin gave me too much trouble to get through. All of the enemies were swarming me, and I couldn't get a grip on how to handle them. This was fascinating because after I beating the vanilla Dark Souls 2, I jumped into Scholar from scratch. And suddenly I found myself moving about the areas differently. No longer rushing, but taking my time, drawing 1 or 2 enemies out at a time and taking them out before healing. I abused the life gem system to make it so that I was basically unkillable. And even then, I wasn't taking as many hits as I should, so I didn't even need them as much. This struck me as hilarious because the nature of Dark Souls franchise is for everything to be cyclical, a repeated cycle. And because I played the games round and round, it has taught me things each time until I understood how to play Scholar. And suddenly, I was actually, believe it or not, having fun. Again, I digress. The purpose of this essay is to A, point out some key differences between Dark Souls 2 and Scholar, but also to explain that how playing Dark Souls 2 gave me an even greater appreciation for how masterful the first game was, by comparison. That being said, this is just the start of what will be a multiple-part series video. In the next one, we will be talking about gameplay. Let me know in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time in the Twisted Knightmare Studio.